Hello, I am Black Libertarian. I call myself that for two reasons. One, because I'm black, and two, because I'm a libertarian, obviously. And now, to prove that I'm a real black person, I shall now wear a do-rag. This, I think, is going to go there. Wrap around there. Yep, I got it. There you go. Perfect. Perfect. And now, to prove that I'm a real libertarian, I am going to take a deep dive into the philosophical grounding of the right of self-ownership and property rights, which is the second of the three libertarian principles we talked about earlier. The NAP, self-ownership and property rights, and the right of freedom of association. So, let's take a deep dive into self-ownership and property rights, the philosophy behind self-ownership, which I shall do as soon as I take this do-rag off. That is done. So now it's time to talk about self-ownership and property rights. What is it? Why do we have it? So, when we talk about property and ownership, the first thing I have to do is tell you what that means. Because libertarians believe that people own themselves and that people own the effects of their actions. You own yourself and you own the effects of your actions. So let's talk about that. First, we need to talk about ownership. What is ownership? What does it mean? Ownership is the exclusive decision-making rights. Or to put it another way, ownership is having exclusive responsibility for a particular thing. And that thing is owned. That thing is then called property. Whenever somebody has exclusive decision-making rights over something, or another way of putting it is exclusive responsibility for something, then that particular thing is property. And so when we talk about, for example, you owning yourself, that means you have exclusive responsibility for / exclusive decision-making rights of your body. Ownership is all about exclusivity. If you don't remember anything else about what I say about the word ownership, it is ownership is all about exclusivity. Basically, what you're doing is you're drawing a circle, and you're putting somebody inside of that circle. And anyone that is inside of that circle has the decision-making rights regarding that thing. And anyone that's not inside of that circle does not have any decision-making rights regarding that thing. And that circle can have as many people inside of it as you want. It can have one person inside of it. It can have 2 people. It can have 5 people. It can have 10 people. It can have 1 million people. It can have 500 billion people. It can have as many people as you want. If something is owned by every person in the world, then that means every person in the world is inside of that circle, and theoretically, if there was a person outside of it, then that person would not have decision-making rights. That circle can have as many people or as few people as you want. There's really no limit to the number of people that can be in there. And whoever's in there has the if it's one person or if it's multiple people, those people collectively have the exclusive decision-making rights. So exclusivity doesn't mean one single person. It can be as many people as you want. That's what I mean when I say exclusivity. It doesn't necessarily mean that one person only is allowed to own something. Maybe multiple people can jointly own something, and that's not a problem. So that's what I mean by ownership. Ownership is having exclusive responsibility for, or another way of putting it is having exclusive decision-making rights of a particular thing. So let's start with how to derive property, how to create property. Where does property come from? Let's start with self-ownership, the most basic form of property, the property that everyone in this world is born with themselves. Every person in this world owns property. Why? Because you own yourself. And because you own yourself, that means that you are property of someone. You're property of yourself. But I want to ask you, why? Why do people own themselves? I mean, it's one thing to say, to claim that people own themselves, but can we prove it? Can we prove that people actually do own themselves? And the answer is yes, we can. Just so you know, there are multiple ways of going through this philosophically and basically coming up with a proof for self-ownership. So what I'm about to tell you is not necessarily the only way to think about this, but it's one of the ways. It's one of the more popular ways, and it's one that I personally subscribe to, and it seems to work. So think about it like this. Think about, for example, your hand. My hand. You own your hand. But why do you own your hand? Why do you own it? If you were to go out and ask random people, hey, why do you own your hand? Most of them are going to say something like, well, I own my hand because it's attached to my body. Or they'll say, I own my hand because I was born with it. Or they'll say, I own my hand because I can control it. Like my thoughts can control my hand in ways that other people's thoughts can't. And that's why I own it. All of those reasons are wrong. Now, all of those reasons are wrong. Although it is true that I do have control over my hand. It's true that my thoughts can control my hand movements and stuff like that, but that is not the reason why I own it. It is true that I was born with my hand. I've had it my whole life, but again, that's not the reason why I own it. And the notion that my hand is attached to my body is not true. It is not true. My hand is actually not attached to my body, and the reason why is because the atoms that make up this hand aren't touching each other. They're not making any physical contact with each other. And so my hand, in a manner of speaking, is actually not attached to my body because the atoms that make up the hand are not actually making any physical contact with each other. The hand isn't attached to the body. In that fact, in that manner of speaking, the body isn't even attached to itself because the atoms that make up your body are not physically touching each other. There's a lot of space in between. And that's the whole plot of the movie Ant-Man. Ant-Man is the superhero who can grow and shrink, but the explanation is that he's not actually growing and shrinking. What's really happening is that the spaces in between his atoms are just getting smaller, so his atoms are just coming closer together to make him look smaller, but he still has the same amount of mass. Like, he still weighs 200 pounds, although he's only this tiny, so when he punches you, it punches you with like the same force of like a 200-pound person, only packed into a tiny, smaller density. Higher density, smaller space. So that's how it goes. There's a whole bunch of space in between the atoms. They're not actually making physical contact with each other. But even if we did say that maybe in just a colloquial sense, my hand really is attached to my body, even then, it still wouldn't be enough to prove that I own it. Because if you look at all of those various types of explanations, my hand is attached to my body, or I was born with it and I still have it now, or I control it with my thoughts. What all of those three things have in common is that they all describe possession. I possess my hand. I have possession over it. However you want to whatever way you want to use to describe that possession, that's basically what all of those explanations boil down to, is possession. I possess my hand. But we should all know at this point that possession is not enough to create ownership. You need more than just possession. Because if we were to say that what you own is simply what you currently possess right now at the moment, then that means that if I broke into somebody's house last night and stole a TV, and I still have the TV today, then I would say, well, I possess the TV now, so that means I own it. So possession obviously is not enough to create ownership. So that's why I say that those answers of why you own your body are not an actual answer. It's part of the answer, but it's only just a part. It's not the whole thing. And so what I want to do is I want to go through this with you. You may have heard that the phrase that possession is 9/10 of the law. And if possession is only 9/10 of the law, then what's the other part? I'm going to go through that with you. I possess my hand, that is true. I possess it. But that in and of itself is not enough to create ownership. We can't derive ownership just from that. We need more. Remember what I said earlier. You own yourself, and you own the effects of your actions. I want you to think about the characteristics that this hand has. The virtues, you could say. One of the things you'll notice about my hand is that it is alive. It's alive. It is made of cells that grow and reproduce. Some of the skin cells on the surface are dead, but that is neither here nor there. The majority of the cells that make up this hand are alive. Now, if they're alive, there are some things we can infer from that. Because if you think about what it would require in order for this hand to be alive, well, in order for it to be alive, it would have needed to have water, and it would have needed nutrients, and it would have needed oxygen, and it would have needed, maybe some other things, maybe cleaning or some other maintenance or what other things you can think of. But the point is that there are certain things that would have been required in order for my hand to be alive. There are certain things that the hand would have needed to get in order for it to be alive now. So if it's alive right now, we can infer that at some point in the past, this hand was given water, nutrients, and oxygen. It had to have been given those things then in order for it to be alive now. All right, are you with me? Not hard so far? Are you still understanding it? All right, good. Next, in order for the hand to get those things, water, nutrients, all that other type of stuff, what would I have needed to do? Well, I would have needed to drink water, right? I would have needed to eat food, right? I would have had to do those things in order for this hand to get the water and nutrients that it needs. in order for it to be alive now. Okay, so so the fact that this hand is alive now means that we can infer that at some point in the past it would have gotten water and nutrients, which means that at some point in the past I would have needed to drink water and eat food. Now, what would it take in order for me to drink water and eat food? Trust me, I really am going somewhere with this. We can infer a few things from the fact that I would have needed to drink water and eat food. Drinking water and eating food, one of the things is that it takes time. It takes time to drink water, time to eat food, time that I could have spent playing Skyrim, right? Now maybe I drink water and eat food while playing Skyrim if I kill two birds with one stone, but still I have to spend some sort of time to drink the water and eat the food. It's not just that I have to spend time, I also have to spend energy. A certain amount of energy lifting the food from wherever it is into my mouth. Whenever I move my muscles require energy. Now, maybe it doesn't take very much energy, but it still requires energy nonetheless. It takes time for my hand to get from the cup to my lips to drink the water. It might not take very much time, but it still takes time nonetheless. So one of the things we can infer is that in order for me to give my hand the nutrients it needs so that it can be alive, I would have needed to spend time, and I would have needed to spend energy. Now, how much time and energy I would need to spend in order to make those things happen can vary greatly. If I just have the food already in my hand, like an apple, if I have an apple that's already sliced and already cleaned and everything, I can just pick up the apple and put it in my mouth and bite and eat. Now, that doesn't take very much time. It doesn't take very much energy, but it's still time and energy nonetheless. But maybe it's not that easy. For example, if for instance I need to prepare the food first before I eat it, so maybe the apple isn't already sliced and washed off, maybe I have to wash the apple off and then slice it, and then reach my hand out, and then bring the hand to my mouth, and then eat the apple, and then my hand will finally get the nutrients it needs. So that type of situation might require a little bit more time and a little bit more energy. Or it could be possible that the time and energy that I spend is even greater than that. So for example, the apple isn't even picked, all right? It's still on the tree. So what I would have to do is go to the tree, climb up the tree, pick the apple, then I can clean it off, and then I can slice it, and then I can put it down, and then I can reach out my hand to the apple slice and put it in my mouth, and we all go home happy. Yay! But under that situation, it would take quite a lot more energy and quite a lot more time in order for me to get the nutrients that my hand needs. So as you can see, there's a spectrum of how much time and how much energy I might have to put in order for this hand to get the nutrients that it needs. On one hand, I might need to put in a whole bunch of time and energy in order to eat the apple and get the resources to my hand. On the other hand, I might have a medium amount of time and energy I might have to spend in order to get it. Or on the other hand, I might have a very, very, very low all the way down there, a very, very small amount of time and a very small amount of energy. But either way, I have to spend time and energy. Now, there is a special word to describe this special blend of time and energy that I'm sacrificing in order for me to get what I want / what I need. That word is labor. Labor is what happens when a person puts time and energy, both, into something, anything, in the hopes of getting some sort of benefit. That is labor. Whenever you spend time and energy, you are laboring. So what I'm doing is I'm putting in labor into this hand. And that labor can represent the apple that I eat or the water that I drink or anything else that I do in order to keep this hand alive. I have to put in labor. And as a result of putting in labor, one of the effects of that labor, the end result, is the fact that this hand is currently alive. That is an effect of my action, the life, all right? The life inside, the fact that the cells are alive, the fact that they have the ability to grow and reproduce, all right? The fact that they're not dead right now, that is an effect of my actions. Remember what I said before, that you own yourself and you own the effect of your actions. This hand, the life, the fact that it's alive right now is an effect of one of my actions. Now, does that mean that I own it? Well, no. It doesn't really mean that I own it just yet. I can't really say just because I've put in labor into this hand that I own it. Because if you think about it, other people have put in labor too into this hand. Like my mother, for instance. Mom, if you're watching, I love you. I don't know if she's watching. But if you are watching, I love you. So my mom has put labor into this hand. She has put in energy and time into getting the nutrients in here that it needs in order for it to be alive. In fact, that's the reason why I'm alive right now, is because there was a time when I was unable to provide labor on my own. I was unable to do labor when I was a baby, right? And so somebody else did the labor for me, all right? And so they put labor into this hand. And when you think about it, maybe other people have contributed labor to this hand as well, like the people who work at the grocery store where I got the apple, right? If I didn't actually pick it off the tree, or maybe if I did pick it off the tree, maybe the person who planted the tree did some sort of labor indirectly and contributed somehow, even if their contribution was only 0.00001%. It's still a contribution. So we can't say that just because I perform labor, that's enough to conclude that I own it. I've mixed my labor in with this hand, and that's enough. That's actually not enough. In the same way that we say, well, if somebody possesses something, that's enough to create ownership. That's not enough either. What you need is both. Can I do this motion with my hand? You need both possession on this side and labor on this side in order to create ownership. You need both. You can't just have one and not have the other. So my mom that contributed labor to this hand, she has the labor part, but she doesn't have the possession. She doesn't possess my body like some sort of spirit or something. That's not how it works. So that's why she doesn't own it. Even though she's contributed labor, she has that half, but she doesn't have the other half, which is possession. You need both. In order to create ownership of something, you need to have both possession and labor. If you have only one and don't have the other, then you cannot create ownership out of that. So that is the real reason why we own our bodies. And so I have created the circle. In this circle of ownership, there's me in it. I've created that circle by putting in labor and possession. Once I have both of these things, I can create ownership. Now that I've created the ownership, I can do with it what I want. I can invite someone else and we can both own something together. Remember what I said earlier, that the atoms that make up your hand aren't actually touching each other. They're not making physical contact, and so they're not actually attached to your body. But that would be true of any other physical object in this world as well. Nothing is actually attached to your body. Your body isn't even attached to itself, because the atoms that make up all of the objects around us, anything that's made of molecules and atoms, are none of those atoms are actually making physical contact with each other. And so the rules of ownership that we talked about when it came to the atoms that make up my hand would also apply to the atoms that make up my TV, and the atoms that make up my house and my car and my shirt that I'm wearing and everything, and my hair on my head, and anything else, any other physical object. It doesn't matter. If it's a physical object, if it's made of molecules and atoms, then the exact same principles apply. If you can create ownership of something. If ownership hasn't already been created by someone else, you can create ownership of something by having possession and by mixing in your labor with that thing, whatever it is. It can be a piece of land, it could be a house, a car, or whatever. Anything at all. You can create ownership of anything, and then once you create that ownership, you can transfer the ownership. I can build a chair like from scratch, and I own the chair because I have possession of the chair, and I've mixed in my labor, so I have both possession and labor. And then so in that case I have created ownership of that chair, and then I can give the chair to somebody else. And then I can transfer the ownership. Now that the ownership is already created, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The person I give it to doesn't have to recreate ownership because it's already created. I can just transfer the ownership to them. So I can create ownership by building a chair, and then I can transfer it to somebody else. And that's how property comes to be. And that's the reason why it's perfectly legitimate to own property, because the same principles that apply to the atoms that make up your body will apply to the atoms that make up anything else, any other physical object in this world. Because remember, you own yourself, and you own the effects of your actions. So, for example, if I were to sneak into somebody's house late at night while they're sleeping, and I sneak into that person's bedroom, and I take a knife, and I stab that person in the chest 100 times, and then the person dies, I have created something. I have created a murder. That murder is the effect of my actions. And so, as a result, I own that murder. Now, if the phrase owning a murder sounds a little antiquated to some people's modern ears, you can just think of it as me having exclusive responsibility for that murder. Because remember what I said, ownership is all about exclusivity. Wherever you find exclusivity, you will find ownership. And so that's the reason why, if we want to put somebody in jail or punish somebody for that person's murder, who are we going to punish? Are we going to punish the person across the street? Are we going to punish some random guy over there? No, they're going to punish me, and exclusively me. I'm the one who should go to prison, and exclusively. If I acted alone and it was just me, and I snuck into the person's house, when they were sleeping, stabbed them to death, I own that murder. I have exclusive responsibility for that murder. And so that's the reason why it makes sense to put me in prison, and like it wouldn't make sense to put some other random person in prison. It would make sense to punish me, because it's not just because I'm the one who did it. Sure, yes, I did it. But remember, the two things that you need in order to create ownership, you need to have possession and you need to put in labor. When I did the act of stabbing that person to sleep, that was labor. That was definitely labor. Now, it's obviously immoral and evil labor, right? But it's labor nonetheless. And so that means that I have exclusive responsibility for that murder, because it was my actions that created the murder. And so if you can have the circle of ownership, and it has me in it. I own that murder. But the effect of your actions doesn't have to be something bad or evil. It can be something good. If I say something, if I'm having a debate with somebody, and then I make an argument, and then the other person said, your argument is stupid, right? What they're doing is they're acknowledging the fact that I have ownership of that argument. I've used possession of my body, mixed it with labor, and I've created something. I've created an argument. And that's why they would attribute the argument to me. They're not going to say, hey, the argument of some random person on Pluto is stupid. No, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, your argument is stupid, right? They say, my argument is stupid, right? That's what they would say, because I used my body and I performed labor, and now the argument is an effect of one of my actions. That argument is an effect of my actions. And so if a person tries to say that self-ownership is invalid, or that there is no such thing as property, or that there's no such thing as ownership, like, that person is self-contradictory in a sense, because in order for them to even, in order for that argument to be attributed to them, in order for me to say, that your argument is false, they have to have possession of their body, they have to perform labor, they have to do something, and then they attribute what they said to them. They have ownership. They have possession of that argument that they made. And so that's why it's axiomatically true that we own ourselves and we own the effects of our actions. Because if you were to try to argue that we don't own ourselves and that we don't own the effects of your actions, that would be self-contradictory, because you're using the effects of your actions to make that argument, and then to attribute that argument to you. So if you were to if you were to say, hey, there's no such thing as self-ownership, there's no such thing as property, all of that is completely meaningless. And then I were to say, hey, that person's argument is stupid. The first thing that other person would say is, what? What do you mean other person? I'm the one who said it. And I would say, nope, you're not the one who said it. Nope, that's not your argument. Because if it was your argument, it would have to be as a result of the effect of your actions, and you would need to have possession of your body in order to make that argument. Because if you didn't have possession, then that means it wouldn't actually be your argument. You wouldn't own it. You wouldn't have exclusive responsibility for that argument being spoken by your mouth. All right, your mouth is making muscle movements, and it's producing the words, and so those words are the effect of your actions. You have exclusive responsibility for that for that argument being spoken by your mouth. And because you have exclusive responsibility, that's the exact definition of what property is. That's the exact definition of what ownership is. So in order to attribute an argument to me or to attribute an argument to anyone else, you need to be able to have property, ownership. You need to have exclusive responsibility for your actions in order to have a debate with me and attribute an argument to me that I've made, and to say that I am exclusively responsible for saying it. And so when somebody possesses something and mixes their labor with it, they own it. And that could be a person's body, it could be some other object, it could be an argument that they made, it could be a murder, it could be whatever. So that is the philosophy behind self-ownership and property rights. You own yourself and you own the effects of your actions. And you are the only person who has decision-making rights over what you own. You alongside whoever else is in that circle of ownership. Thank you very much for watching. If you agree with what I said, or if you didn't agree with what I said, and anything in between, leave a comment down below. I will reply to every single comment, I promise. This is Black Libertarian. I'll see you next time.